Hello, welcome to Crime Talk. I'm Mrs. W.
I'm Joe, one of two.
We are going to talk about Robert Pickton. You might know him as the pig farmer, but he was a serial killer, Canadian serial killer, and he was convicted in 2007 of the second degree murders of six women, even though there were quite a few more. There were like over 60. So we found out so much information that is just going to blow you away. I know it's stuff I didn't even know. Joe, you dug all that up, and yeah, that it's crazy. But let's get to it. I do want to say hello to everyone in the chat. Hello, Warrior in the Garden. Um, so yeah, Robert Pickton, he was born October 24th, 1949. So he was arrested in 2002, and he was just the subject of a really lengthy investigation. He was born in Port Coquitlam, and that's near Vancouver, I think maybe 15 miles. So he and his brother David and their sister were raised by their parents on just like this really big pig farm. Um, it wasn't really clean. It was just like it's not like a pig farm, like a commercial clean. It was just really trashy, filthy, just a place you really wouldn't want to keep livestock or anything alive. Um, so investigators, they first drove out to the property where, there were just like these big piles of earth and like freshly dug. Um, it almost looked like a bunker or something. And this had just raised concerns that maybe, Pickton was the one taking women off the streets of Vancouver because there was a lot of women missing. Um, but it was definitely not a rescue mission of all these missing prostitutes because what happened, yeah, if you don't know what happened, you're definitely about to find out. But I will give you a hint. If you ever saw Silence of the Lambs and Mr. Verger or Verger, whatever, yeah, so that's kind of a hint there. Um, so the parents passed away in the 70s. So the farm, it was basically passed down to the siblings. So Robert and his brother, they like took over the daily operations, but yeah, I don't really think they were capable. So their sister moved away, and that was, yeah, shoot, that was smart. Over the next 20 years, they attempted to run the farm, but pretty quickly they stopped doing any sort of care and maintenance, and so it just went further into decline. And neighbors just claimed the pigs were still there; they were free roaming the property, and the brothers seemed to have just stopped bathing. And even after walking through mud and feces, that they kept their boots on when they went inside the home. I can only imagine how gross. So one of the farm workers that stayed with the Pictons, um, it was a guy named Bill Hiscox, and he talked about how creepy the farm was, including that Robert was prone to like really bizarre behavior, and even though he didn't smoke or drink or do any drugs, like he just really was really weird. Eventually, the brothers realized that they just weren't cut out to run the farm. It was really overwhelming, and so, like their family had for generations before them, they just couldn't do it. So they decided, let's just sell portions of the land. And then when they found out, how much their land was worth, they began to sell it little by little. So I guess between 1994 and 1995, they sold almost all of their land to like an urban developer, and they got over $5 million, for this land. So you have to keep in mind, it's like the Pictons finally come into some money after, all this time. And you would think that they would use it to, I don't know, buy some soap or, take a shower. They didn't. They didn't. Nothing changed. Nothing, literally nothing changed about their lifestyle. So, suddenly these failed pig farmers, they became millionaires and they didn't know what to do with the money. So, after a year of just sitting on it, they decide they want to do something good, which is really ironic, but okay. So, they established a charity and they called it they called it the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. And this was like in 1996. So the charity's purpose on paper, was to raise money for organizations they deemed worthy, by putting on events like, I guess, dances and shows and, whatever. And this might have been their intention for the charity, but what it became, it was just like this wild drug and alcohol, crazy party. And like, it was like inside the slaughterhouse, even though it wasn't being used anymore and they were no longer, pig farming, but it still had like, those huge hooks hanging from the ceiling. And there were like blood stains all over the ground and like underneath, where the blood ran down. Um, so the Piggy Palace parties were, they really quickly became infamous and they were drawing unbelievably large crowds. Like, I'm talking like 2,000 people, you know? I mean, these people, they were coming for these parties. I have no idea why. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine, but, to each his own. So yeah, these parties, like 2,000 people, mostly like bikers, prostitutes, drug addicts, and I guess like the downtrodden of downtown Vancouver. And so because Robert had became very familiar, um, with that area because he'd been going there mainly to dispose of animal waste. So he started going there again, only this time it was like to recruit people to come to the party. And I don't really know how he did that, but I would imagine it was something like, hey, you want to have a good time? Yeah, I got some barbecue and some drugs. And, just come on down and we'll have a blast. So
Well, he
I'm
offered the
assuming.
prostitutes. He offered prostitutes drugs. Um,
Oh,
is what he
yeah.
was doing. And
Yeah.
we'll maybe hopefully later if we have time we'll let you know where he may have gotten these drugs. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I tell you, this story is insane. But so basically, he offered them all that. And then he's doing all this recruiting and women are just disappearing in droves. Constantly disappearing. So the disappearances were noticed by, people of the Lower East Side, but they, weren't reporting it because, they had a general distrust of the police. So they were all, sketch. And so they didn't want anything to do with the police, because I guess they didn't want to draw attention to, probably the petty crimes that they were committing. So, soon there were reports of like a serial killer in the area. And then residents would only go out in groups because they were scared. And, I don't blame them. So they were constantly on edge, just keeping an eye out for any oddities going on or strange cars and people. And they didn't know really what they were looking for. They were just seriously frightened. And even with all the heightened security, women still continue to go missing and like at a very rapid pace. So no one really had a clue why. Um, the police were finally contacted and their response was basically nobody, no crime. So, they just said their lifestyles must caught up with them. And well, um, so basically the public just found out that the police didn't prioritize this because the women were drug addicts and prostitutes. And so, the police were like, nope, we totally didn't, it was just kind of what they said, but everybody kind of knew they were clearly, not, investigating. So on March the 22nd of 97, so this is like 1 year after Piggy Palace started throwing all these wild and crazy parties and dozens of women had gone missing. The Picton's neighbor heard like a frantic knock on their door, so they quickly opened it and they found this woman. She's like all hunched over. She's got a hand on her stomach, and the other one, her other hand, she was like dangling a handcuff on her wrist. So of course they're like shocked, but quickly after they saw her, they got her inside. They called an ambulance, and she was rushed to the ER. She had emergency surgery, and when she was in recovery, she told the nurses her name was Wendy and that, she had been at one of these Piggy Palace parties, and one of the owners, and she told his name, Robert Pickton, said that he had tried to cuff her, and when he did, she fought back, and he drew a knife, he stabbed her in the stomach, and she was able to grab the knife, and she stabbed him in the face before she turned and just ran out the door. Um, no, and then she went to the neighbor's house, of course. So right after she told the nurses this, Robert Pickton shows up at the exact same hospital, and his injuries matched up, and he had like this serious like laceration on his face, which totally went along with what she said. So the police who showed up minutes later and like after they searched him, they actually found a handcuff key that was like, it was the handcuff key that unlocked the cuffs on Wendy's arm. So, you know, I mean, you would think that that would just kind of seal the deal. But no, they did arrest him for attempted murder, but Robert told them she's lying. She's a drug addict, and she'd come to one of his parties and tried to rob them. He confronted her, and then a struggle ensued, and like both of them got stabbed. Blah blah blah. So Robert told the police he was lucky to be alive, and guess what? They believed him. So they believed him. They let him go. They dropped all his charges. So when Robert went back to the farm, the worker, Bill, remember Bill Hiscox I was telling you about that thought Robert was weird. Um, okay, so he was growing really suspicious of Robert. And I mean, who can blame him, But he had read about all the missing women, and he also knew that Robert went there regularly, to pick up women, for the parties. And so Bill had always had this like gut feeling that something was off, with Robert. So he waited a couple of months before deciding he had to tell somebody. So, of course, he called Crime Stoppers, the Crime Stoppers tip line. And then he told them that most likely Robert had attacked Wendy, not the other way around, and that Robert was most likely responsible for all the missing women. So Bill really he did investigators a solid because, they clearly couldn't put two and two together because after talking to Robert, at the hospital, so he told them a guest at the party had seen a pile of women's clothing inside Robert's trailer. So that's like really suspicious, Um, so along they didn't have any purses or purses and ID cards like in that pile. So police followed up with the women to like confirm what she saw. And I think her name was Lisa, but she wouldn't cooperate because I guess she's like afraid of Robert. So without her testimony, the police weren't able to secure search warrants to investigate. So they just moved on. So over the next few years, the parties continued until the city finally shut them down, even though the women kept disappearing and Bill was literally calling them all the time. Have to wonder about Bill, Joe. I feel like he knew more, but it's like, why the sudden, I mean, I feel he had to have known what was going on, you know, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure anyone that was, once we go over the details, anyone that was at that farm pretty much had to know what was going on. There's really not a big way around it. So, uh, I think Bill was trying to kind of get out of the group and save himself, maybe, but he did. The police didn't listen to him. I mean, they didn't pay much attention to him at all. The lead investigator was a female, and he went and said that in those clothes that he had found supposedly were bloody clothes. So
Hmm.
there was plenty of evidence there that the police could have followed up on or possibly gotten more information about, but it just didn't happen. Police basically told Bill, come back when you have more solid evidence. um,
Yeah.
so I would think if he's close to these people, he would have to be concerned about his safety, but I don't know why you would stick around, and how you could be around that and not know.
That is true. Yeah, especially when the detective, the female detective, even after all the clothes and everything were found, I mean, she said, "Call us back when you find some real evidence." So
Yeah,
I
it was like
thought
the
that
police
was
were,
odd.
were completely uninterested. It's like they were kind of happy the prostitutes were going missing.
Mhm. Let's yeah. Let's show the first clip.
There are growing calls tonight for a public inquiry into the Robert Pickton case as more details emerge, now that the remaining 20 murder charges against him have been set aside. Most of the publication bans in the Pickton case have been lifted, and we are now hearing evidence that the jury at his murder trial did not. The release of these new and shocking details is prompting some strong reactions from the families of the women that Pickton murdered, including here on Vancouver Island, and more calls for an inquiry. Shachi Curl has our top story and the graphic details.
These are among the thousands of documents collected during the course of the Robert Pickton trial. They contain information that until now could not be reported. Pickton was charged and convicted of killing 6 women, sex trade workers connected to Vancouver's downtown east side. Yesterday, charges against Pickton related to the murders of 20 other women were stayed, and as a result, the publication ban is now lifted. Information about the crimes and the police investigation are coming to light, information that was kept from the jury.
The public has to have access to as much of the information as is necessary for it to be able to scrutinize and debate what happened and whether people did a good job.
The new details include the story of a bloody knife fight between Pickton and an alleged would-be victim on his farm. The struggle sent both Pickton and a prostitute to the same hospital back in 1997. Doctors removed a handcuff on the prostitute's wrist using a key found in Pickton's pocket. At the time, charges against him were dropped. Other gruesome details revealed DNA of the murdered women found in processed meat on his farm. Marnie Frey was murdered by Robert Pickton. In Port Hardy today, her parents and daughters say they are happy the public is finally hearing these details.
It's about time. I think the public needs to know exactly what happened and what we've gone through.
They're still calling for a public inquiry into how police, who were aware of Pickton as far back as the mid-90s, couldn't arrest him until 2002.
But damn it, they knew about this clown in 1998, and so did some of their other people. Like Kim Roscoe knew about it. And what did they do with him? They gave him the golden handshake and said goodbye. I mean, this is a crock.
Attorney General Mike DeYoung could decide on an inquiry as soon as next month. Meantime, the Frey say these details are only the beginning of what the public will learn.
Well, I think they are going to be horrified, and that's why I didn't like the media ban to start with. I think if the public should know what's going on.
More information will include Pickton's jailhouse confession, but to the relief of the Freys and 25 other families, a ban will remain on access to photos and of body parts found on the farm. In Victoria, Shachi Curl, A News.
So, yeah, he was busy. You could tell. Like, I mean, it's like if it's just one, like if Robert is working alone, I don't think he could pull it off, do you, Joe?
No.
I don't think so either. And like you said, I think the Bill guy probably realized that eventually they're going to close in, and he wanted to out him, I guess, before, like he went under too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, when the police are closing in, the smartest thing to do is jump off the wagon and make a deal. you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
save yourself. But what I really liked about the clip that you just showed is it showed me my first view of like where the crimes took place, and you can clearly see, yeah, it was 6 acres, but it wasn't a sprawling 6 acres where you could hide a bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
especially hiding, screaming and yelling women and then their bodies, so,
Yeah.
so, like I said, I don't see how anyone that was there on a regular basis or on a daily basis wouldn't
Yeah.
wouldn't know what was going on.
Yeah. So in 2002, a former employee told police he'd seen lots of illegal weapons in Robert's trailer. So because of that, they were able to get a search warrant. So in February, they did it and they found illegal guns and like many items like belonging to the missing women. So he was arrested and he was let out on bail. And they told him, he couldn't go back to the farm until they were done, conducting a more thorough search. And during that search, they found blood of one of the missing women inside Robert's trailer. So he was basically rearrested and charged with murder. And while in jail, he shared his cell with somebody he thought was just a detainee, but it was an undercover investigator. And so yeah, these investigators are beginning to redeem themselves because, finally something is happening. So their entire interaction, it was recorded. And, Robert makes these really shocking statements and he admitted he killed 49 people, but he had wanted to make it an even 50. Well, that tells me he has OCD, right, Joe? I mean, what does that sound like? An OCD thing? Yeah, Joe, I've learned quite a bit from you. Yeah, if anyone in the chat doesn't know, Joe does have a background in psychiatry, so he is really really good, which is why I love doing the show with him because he's really good at picking these things up about the crimes that we talk about and the particular murderers or whoever committed the crime.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's like I mean, the fact that he killed 49 people, but he wanted to make it an even 50. I don't know. That's funny. So his killing spree, it began in 91, but it was probably before that, I would imagine. And Joe, you can if you want to tell about Robert's mom, what you found out about her and the 14-year-old.
And the incident when they were children.
Yeah.
There was a couple of things that really stood out to me from Robert, and people called him Willie. But that what stood out from his childhood was, number one, he was deathly afraid of showers. Occasionally, he would take a bath, but something in his childhood made him extremely afraid of showers. So last week, the guy we covered was clearly a psychopath. This week, the guy we're talking about is clearly a sociopath. He never took a bath from childhood. Basically, he didn't take care of his personal hygiene from the time he was a child all the way through adulthood because he just didn't care, So, and that's what you see with a sociopath. They tend to, you can clearly see that they don't like people. And hygiene, believe it or not, is a good indicator of somebody's mental health. So that there's that part. But Willie's younger brother, or Robert's younger brother, whichever you want to call him, David, on the day that David got his driver's license, he was driving his father's truck. He was going through the neighborhood. He hit a 14-year-old boy. He ran home and told his mother. No one's real sure if they ran back to the scene or if they drove back to the scene. But when the mother got to the scene, she rolled the boy's body into a ditch. And it turns out from autopsy that the boy drowned. He wasn't killed by being hit by the vehicle. He would have survived that, but he drowned. Now, the family, everybody, knew what had happened and that the mother rolled the body into the ditch and resulted in a death. They were looking for the driver. The one who tells this story is the person that typically fixed their vehicles when they were broke down. They brought the truck to him and had him fix it where it was dented, where they hit the boy. But nobody ever put two and two together and caught the mother. But she taught her sons at a very early age that it was okay to not only kill animals, because they had there's some bizarre stories from his childhood and the butchering of animals. We talked a little bit about his hygiene and the fact he didn't like a shower. What he did like to do is play hide and seek, and you know where he would hide? In
No.
the carcasses of pigs.
Ew.
So,
Oh my God.
so he was more comfortable inside the carcass of a gutted pig, hiding from. And oftentimes, his sister described it as playing hide and seek. I suspect he was hiding from one of his parents, but he felt more comfortable inside a slaughtered pig than in a shower. Just imagine that.
Oh my God.
How messed up that is as a child.
I can't even
And
imagine the smell.
yeah, and then he went to school and he never took a bath. The other kids hated him. He didn't care. That's where the sociopathic type of qualities or traits come in. But like I said, the boys learned at a young age how to butcher animals, and they were surrounded by death and carcasses, and it didn't bother them. And in this case, David, his younger brother, hit a boy, and they knew this boy. He was from the neighborhood, and the mother ended up killing the boy, but no one ever caught up to him. So you
So
wonder.
I guess the mom did not want her son to go down for
For hitting the boy. Yeah.
right. I tell you, mother's love, right? So yeah, and that's just my dark humor. I'm not really serious. So I guess how his he and his brother did this piggy palace thing, and I guess they lived together, they killed together, they were pretty tight. So even though it never really said much about his brother's involvement in the murders, he was. I mean, it's just like there's no way that he could have not been involved in some way, shape, or form. He had to have help. So to lure the victims, what he did to lure the victims to the farm, he would handcuff them, take them to his trailer, and tell them it's over now. Then he would inject antifreeze into them, or he would strangle them to death. So after he'd moved their body like to the slaughterhouse where he would just butcher them like kind of like the pigs, and then most of the remains would be fed to the pigs. So the rest he took to the East Side rendering plant that turns basically it turns animal waste into, like in this case human, into gelatin. So basically, Robert's victims ended up in things like, cosmetics, lipsticks, gummy bears. We all like gummy bears. But so yeah, I mean, that's so, I hate to say it, but like anyone from that area probably eating Robert's victims in the gummy bears. So
Yeah, there is evidence and some testimony to indicate that Robert intended his neighbors and some extended family members to eat part of these women's flesh. So he would mix it up into the pig meat that they sold, the little bit that they sold.
yeah, he also used it to serve at the Piggy Palace parties. So if you
Right.
went to the Piggy Palace parties, you were definitely eating human.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that was quite a charity. So it's also given to food banks and like you said, Joe, neighbors, and he also gave it to orphanages. So remains of I think it was 26 the women were found underneath the slaughterhouse, and he was charged with all 26 murders, but only 6 turned into convictions because of the lack of evidence. So he was sentenced to life. So that's what he got. Did you find out, did his brother also get a sentencing or no?
No, his brother and the helper on the farm, that Bill Hiscox, actually were suspected of 15 of the murders. And they actually found 33 different or 33 bones and things from from 33 different victims. But yeah, they actually talked to Bill Hiscox and brother David, and they suspected that they may have been involved, but they decided they didn't have enough evidence and they let them go.
Mm.
Now, David was interviewed later, before they actually started finding the bodies, and he said on TV, he said, "Oh, I don't have anything to do with it. I'm sure my brother wouldn't have done that kind of thing. All that dirt and stuff on our farm was brought from the city dump, so it was probably truckers that did it." Well,
Wow.
when they started finding the body parts, then David changed his story and said, you know, I was just involved with the business part. I ran the books. I never went out to the slaughterhouse. I didn't know what Willie was doing out there. So his story completely changed. But from what I hear that, from other people or reports is that David is a real kind of nasty dude, and he doesn't smell very well, and he uses foul language, and he obviously doesn't like people. So
Yeah. Hi, Frank. Yeah, I just wanted to say hi. Frank said, human meat. And he said there's a video for your cooking channel. Or that's what NZ Kiwi said. There's a video for your cooking channel. That's funny.
I'll get the
So
end.
yeah, and Frank, this Robert Pickton, like, these parties, yeah, it was hooker parties. Yeah, so hookers. Um, but yeah, so Joe, I think let's go to the second clip. And then I want to talk about what Joe found out today. So let's hear it.
Now, the Robert Pickton tapes. The serial killer comes close to admitting multiple murders in a newly released video of a police interrogation, but Pickton stops short of a complete confession. The 11-hour interview shows Pickton saying that he had one more apparent killing in mind, but it didn't happen because he says he got sloppy. A News reporter Eric Thompson has the latest.
What I want you to do, Rob.
Rob is Robert Willie Pickton, slumped in his chair, looking bored with the proceedings as the police officer tried to get him to talk hours after he was arrested.
What girls that you remember have ever been out to your place?
His place was a pig farm in Port Coquitlam, where police had found the remains of some of Vancouver's missing women. In the early hours, as Pickton is shown photos of the women, he insists he knows nothing.
I don't know. There's so many people coming in my place, I don't know.
With each picture, there's nary a glimmer of recognition.
Has she ever been to your place? Her name's Mona.
That would have been Mona Wilson, one of the 6 women Pickton was convicted of killing, 6 counts of murder in the second degree. Because the Supreme Court of Canada recently quashed Pickton's bid for a new trial, the Crown stayed the other 20 murder charges.
She's pretty.
This criminologist says the tape is chilling, but nothing about it is surprising.
He just looked upon this as a number, so totally depersonalized, so totally detached, so totally insensitive, so totally unempathetic, classic psychopathic personality.
Pickton has never been out of jail since those police interviews of 8 years ago. He is now 60 years old and is serving a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years, meaning he will likely die behind bars. Eric Thompson, A News.
Okay, so yeah, he looks really dirty. Like he's like, I wonder if, I mean, I guess he would have to have a shower in prison. I mean, I think they make you take a shower, so I guess now he does. I don't know. I don't really know anything about, prison, but I do think that, they probably make him shower. You know what? That is a good question for Robert, So I did get his address. So, like Michael Swango that we did last week, waiting to hear back, we will get Robert Pickton a letter in the mail and see if he responds. And of course, we'll share that with you listeners. So, look forward to that. So I did want to say hi to Smalls, Tennessee. Thank you for the Plum Island. Yeah, that's definitely a good one. And hello, Jedi Patriot. Anybody I didn't mention, hello. I didn't see you. I'm not really good with the chat thing because I have like the 2 screens I'm looking at. But So, Joe,
Hmm.
like, what do you think is like at this point with the players in this? Do you want to tell them what you found out today, which was kind of mind blowing, even for me? Like, I'm still in shock. I'm still like trying to process.
Yeah, this story about this pig farm and Mr. Pickton and his family was bad enough to start with, but I got a tip from somebody that lives up in the British Columbia area where this all took place that there was a lot more to this story than what was out there. So I tried for a while to try to find stuff, and I couldn't, but I finally did find some stuff, and it was really eye-opening and interesting. This case and the farm have kind of turned into somewhat of like an Epstein Island situation. It appears that there may have been a snuff film operation going on at that pig farm. And it was an operation that not only Willie knew about, or Robert, but his brother David, his sister Linda, and some local officials, including local police officers and the mayor locally. That's the accusations anyway. But this information about the pig farm being used as a snuff film factory came from a couple of prostitutes and another woman um, who who actually escaped from the farm. So one of the two of the prostitute women, one was named Roxy, and then she had a friend. I forget what the friend's name was. I can check. It was like Miranda or something like that. But anyway, her and her friend were told that don't go out to the farm 3 times. If you go out for a third time, that's when they kill you, right? And they do it on film, and then they sell the films for $250,000. Apparently, they have eager buyers in Asia and other parts of the U.S. But these two young prostitutes, they were drug users and drug addiction. And Willie had come around when they had already been out there twice, and they were kind of jonesing for drugs. And Willie promised them drugs. So Roxy didn't go, but Willie tried to kidnap her and got her in a van, and her friend was also in the van. But Roxy said, if you don't pull over right now, I'm going to shit myself and I'm going to shit all over your van. And he didn't want that. So he pulled over and she was able
I'm
to.
sorry. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
so he is this like filthy. You would think that if she said that I'm gonna shit all over your van, that like would he really care? I mean, he's like walking through pig shit all the time. He doesn't bathe. He
Yeah.
hides
I
pig
think they,
carcasses, but the threat of shitting in his van is gonna yeah,
well,
okay.
I think it was an evidence thing, is what kind of Roxy felt like it was, is that he was
Okay, that
afraid.
makes sense.
Yeah, he was afraid she'd leave a bunch of evidence in the van, because he was always going into Vancouver and stalking these women, and he would stalk them before he would actually get them involved. But these two young ladies, or one young lady, Roxy now, escaped from there, and her friend ended up in the wood chipper. The wood chipper was the way that they destroyed the bodies. After they butchered them, they would chop them up in a wood chipper and then feed them to the pigs. So her
Wow.
friend her friend ended up there, but it all kind of opened up a can of worms, because then another witness came forward and said that she had called the police, the local Canadian Royal Mounted Police, uh, to her house because her ex-husband was harassing her. The policeman that arrived was a dude with the last name of Michaels. Instead of helping her, Michaels, the police officer, drugged her and raped her, and then forced her into this prostitution ring that Willie and the Pickton family were part of. So she had been out to the farm, and she's the one that started telling everybody about the snuff films, because she said she witnessed a lot of them. Um, she said that they would bring young girls to the farm. They would drug them, rape them, and then kill them on film and show them. So, there's some evidence, and these witnesses have come forward and they've testified to investigators, but it doesn't seem like it's gone very far. Um, other than just they gave the information. Uh, but the police officer Michelson, um, there's other women who also say that he is part of that uh, crew that creates these snuff films, and that, like I said, each film is sold for $250,000 a piece. Um, and so it looks like, and then there's accusations that the elite, whenever they killed somebody or a young girl or these devil worshiping cults, when they needed rid of bodies, they would take them to the Pickton farm. And locally, the native Indians locally complain that so many of their young female children are missing. Um, and we know what's happened recently in Canada, where they've found the mass graves at different orphanages and things. And these young children that are missing, young women that are missing from the Vancouver area, are just similar to the ones in the orphanages, because they're not required to have birth certificates. So there's no evidence of birth. So these mothers and families that are missing their children, their native children, can't prove that they ever existed to start with. So the investigation has gone nowhere. But there's rumors that the elite in Canada, and the elite pedophiles all were involved one way or another, or connected to this Pickton farm and the snuff films that were created there. Not only snuff films, but also films of children being raped, and things like that. Now, Mrs. W and I have discussed this kind of at length, and it's hard for decent people like the folks in our audience, and us, to imagine that snuff films are real. And if you don't know what a snuff film is, that's just basically a murder on film. And then some people are so interested in that, or maybe just curious about it, that they are willing to pay to watch that film of someone being killed. And I guess children being killed or raped on film commands a much higher price. So it's really disturbing. I know I've never seen a snuff film per se. If you've ever seen the film series Faces of Death, that's probably pretty close, to what a snuff film would kind of feel like and be like.
Yeah.
But
I'm pretty sure if you were ever on, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but on ogrish.com, it was one of those shock and gore sites, and I think it was back in the 90s or the early 2000s, but it was very they had a lot of stuff on there, and pretty sure it was real. I'm no expert, but yeah, I've seen horror. I know what special effects. I know all the Hollywood stuff, and yeah, this was real, and which kind of explains why the guy went to prison. I don't know how many years. I don't know the situation now, but the site never returned, and I can't even find any of the videos anymore that I saw. Like, it's probably out there on the dark web. But has anyone in the chat, have you ever seen a snuff film? So,
I was going to
yeah,
say,
just tell it.
a psychiatrist I worked with had told me, and this was back in the 80s. We worked together at the hospital. My brother and I worked together at the hospital, so we were close with this psychiatrist. He was a Navy vet. My brother actually mowed his lawn and stuff for him, and took care of his elderly grandmother sometimes. But he said when he lived in New York, he paid to see a snuff film. And it was,
Wow.
yeah, he said it was a young lady who was killed. He, there was no doubt in his mind, and there's no doubt in my mind, that it was real. And there's no doubt in my mind that he was telling the truth. And so, I know us decent people don't think about things like that much. And even when you hear about it, it does maybe not impact you like it maybe should, because we just have a hard time imagining that it happens. But there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people killed on film for profit.
Yeah, and think about it. I guess it drives like hard prices, like, because it's something nobody can see. I mean,
Right.
you can't see it unless you pay for it, unless you go out there on the dark web, which I don't recommend. But oh, I do want to say thank you to Thong Chaser. Thank you very much for the cookie. I like cookies actually. So
Now there was some more
um
information. I'm sorry, there was some more information on this snuff film operation that I wanted to share. Sometimes you doubt. Like I said, this story kind of grew, and I wasn't sure it was going to be a big story or a good story until I started, reading everything. But once they found the Pickton farm being the snuff film production facility, the production facility moved into downtown Vancouver, apparently, and not far from the police station, where we know at least one police officer, actually three. The names of the other two weren't given because they weren't sure who they were, but there was at least three police officers supposedly involved in this snuff film operation. And the associates that Pigton had, some of these companies you may have heard of. The snuff film operation, the front was a film company called Goodbye Girls. And the network involves Michelson, the police officer. There was a CBS cameraman named Jerry Dunn associated with Pogo Productions. And then there's a filmmaker named Dave Collins who owns Lionsgate Studios. I think that may be one that you all have heard of before, because I've heard of Lionsgate Studios. I've watched
oh
some.
yeah, definitely. It's a big one.
Right. And they know that there was an underworld enforcer named Larry. He would take care of anybody that was trying to rat them out. A porn film star named Tom Tassie and the Pinkton's brothers were all involved in this snuff film studio in the basement. Interesting enough, the owner of the Lionsgate studio, Dave Collins, is a big donor to the Clinton Foundation. Isn't that funny how that kind of stuff keeps popping up? So
That
because
is. Yeah, and Joe, I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you saw this in the chat, but Quintessential JFK said, "I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't lead to some famous people." So, kind of like, I guess, about like how it ties into the elites.
yeah, there's a guy that's a former firefighter from the area. His name is Norm Travesty, and it's like travesty except with a T, you replace it with a Y, SY. Um, but he was a former firefighter, and he's got disabled on the job, and he's had all kinds of trouble with the local officials trying to get his disability payments and stuff. And then he found out that a lot of guys that tried to get disability after being injured on the job as firemen were suicided. All of them were committing suicide so that the city wouldn't have to pay. But he claims that the city is very corrupt, including the mayor, and he was the one that said that the Lionsgate films also, the guy also ran something called Greek Life Films, where they showed the snuff films. They are big Clinton Foundation donors. So it's just crazy how we get these stories popping up about crimes like this, and the Clintons are always somehow involved. It's just
Definitely.
crazy. I mean, I know the argument and about that is as well. The Clintons know a lot of people, and I know that's true. But a lot of people they know or have been, connected with stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what I was going to say about, the elites and how it ties back to Epstein as far as like and Trudeau, a body dumping for all the missing, human trafficked, like the kids and stuff. So, yeah. And it would make sense why I just thought that the police in that city were just really dumb, or didn't know how to do their job. But it would make sense because the police were involved as well. They were securing basically a body dumping ground, according to this conspiracy theory. Um, I just think that even though the conspiracy theory hasn't been proven, it would tie up so many holes. It would explain how Robert Pickton continued to get off. Even showing up at the hospital that whole they didn't even bother to further investigate it. They're just like, okay, yeah, you're free to go. It would really make a lot of sense. That's the only thing that would make sense. Otherwise, you know, the police department there really and their investigators really need some better training.
Well, I think it was 1998. There was a big party at the farm that the police had to come and break up. And you would think at that point there would have been some more investigation. I think that kind of led to the farm finally being under some type of surveillance, but I think it was because it had gotten to the point everybody knew it and the police had no choice.
Yeah. Quintessential JFK said that pornography is about degrading women and it leads to child porn. And the ultimate goal of porn addiction is murder. I think, with that said, pornography itself, it kind of desensitizes you. So it takes more for the watcher or the viewer to get off. So it's going to take more. So it just like when you become desensitized to something like that, especially with all the fetish porn they have, I mean, I could totally see that. Yeah, and it is degrading. It's I'm sure it's bad for relationships and because I've watched a lot of documentaries on that type of thing, and it's really amazing how you could have a perfectly healthy, normal sex life, and then you put porn in the mix, and then the next thing you know, it's like you can't function if you don't have the pornography, which hence the ruining of relationships. But so yeah, and Cloud Watcher said, I think Pinkton was selling films for royals. Oh yeah, that's yeah, probably so. Because who would have the money to pay those high prices but elites? So yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Um, Warrior in the Garden said, I knew there was something weird about Lionsgate. Yeah, yeah. I think, generally the film industry in Hollywood, it's there's always something. It's just like it. And Joe, you and I were talking about this last night. It's been out there, and it goes well beyond. Corey Feldman did not have to come out and say, "Hey, there's pornography in this industry." No, I think everybody knew. I think it's everywhere, and you just don't realize how much is out there and who's involved until like the last few years and since Pizzagate. Um, so NZ Kiwi was asking about a documentary, and we're actually playing one. After the show. So if you guys hang around, there will be a Robert Pickton documentary. But now that Joe has cleared up these, kind of put together some holes with his research and talking to people that are, from that area, now, we kind of have an idea that this Pickton case it's more than meets the eye. It probably was a dumping ground. It probably went back as far as when his parents were alive. I do want to kind of say, his parents, I'm sure, were not innocent. I'm sure the whole family was involved. I think that it well goes before. I don't think it was just, Robert, even though he's the one that went down for it. Let's go to the, I think, third clip.
Another man is listed as the author, but the book is the work and the words of Robert William Pickton, Canada's deadliest serial killer, a former pig farmer who's in a maximum security prison in BC. He was convicted of killing 6 women, but confessed to killing 49. The back cover calls him the Fall Guy, and indeed, in 144 rambling pages, Pickton does proclaim his innocence. Victims' families are outraged. Sandra Gagnon's sister, Janet Henry, used to frequent Pickton's farm and went missing in 1997.
It really disgusts me knowing that the worst serial killer in Canadian history has the nerve to write that book and reopen wounds.
So, how did Pickton get a book published? CTV is reporting Pickton had the manuscript smuggled out of prison by a former cellmate who gave it to a friend who apparently used a self-publishing website. From there, it's an easy jump to online booksellers, both in the US and Canada.
How can they write books when they're supposed to be doing time for something so brutal?
Last fall, there was an uproar when serial killer Paul Bernardo published a novel online. It was quickly yanked from Amazon. Ontario has a law preventing criminals from profiting from their crimes. BC has no such law. The BC government is appealing to Amazon to take down Pickton's book. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, so our boy Robert wrote a book. There you go. It's you can go and order it, and that's he's got a book out there, and it clearly is a slap in the face to the victims, as you just saw in the interview. Frank was saying pigs eat human. Pigs eat anything. So it's like they literally will eat anything. And it really was the perfect way to dispose of that. And I can only imagine the smell, but the farm of I saw the photos and you could see them in the video and you will see them next in the documentary, but it's a lot. It's really gross. I guess we're going to wrap it up so we can show this documentary. Is there anything you wanted to add, Joe?
No, I'm just like I said, it's just this case opens up a big can of worms. If you start doing your own research, which we always encourage, there's a lot out there, a lot of information out there. So if you enjoy this, go look.
Yes. Okay. So we are going to show the documentary, but it will be on Twitch only. So if you listeners will just head over to Twitch for that. And I'm not sure if it'll be on Foxhole. Is it going to be on Foxhole, Joe?
I'm not sure if I think maybe if we don't have trouble with running, but we've had some trouble running on Foxhole.
Okay.
So if it's not here on Foxhole, or if it starts running on Foxhole and there's a glitch, it's over on Twitch.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank everyone for joining us, and this case was definitely, it was really interesting. I want to thank Cloud Watcher, Smalls, Tennessee, Quintessential JFK. And I don't know if he's making money on this book, but I would not be surprised if he has some funds on his commissary. I'm pretty sure he probably does.
His defense was that he was mentally impaired, mentally retarded. His IQ tested out at 86, which is below the 100 average, but not the 70 required for mental retardation. So, but I wouldn't expect the book to be written well, but if it is, I would say that that's a bit suspicious. So
yeah, I think so. I think so too.
And I think we also we need to remember to release the pills.
Oh yeah, I don't know how to do that, but yes, release the pills. I think Mr. W will do that. I never remember. I don't know how to.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it either, and I always forget too. But I just looked up at the top of the screen and saw that pill, and was like, "Oh yeah, we've got to do that."
Yes. So I don't know if it's okay. Yeah, he said released. Okay, so
Cool.
yeah, very cool. Okay, well, you guys have a good evening. Thank you again for joining us. And like I said, if you hang around, the documentary will be playing next, definitely on Twitch. Have a good night.
Thank you.